Mongrel intruder. That tarnished, it seemeth.
Hey, it's me, Six Stones, finally back with another video that isn't a short. I know it's been a while since I posted a video like this, but I have been busy over the past year. I started uni back up again, so I've been studying. I'm on break now, so hopefully I can get a few more videos like this before I'm back to studying again. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Elden Ring, specifically the new DLC that dropped, Shadow of the Erdtree, my recent addiction when it comes to gaming. So it's been a few weeks now since the DLC dropped, so I will be talking full spoilers in this video while giving my thoughts. So if you have not beaten the DLC, maybe you're stuck on Mesmer or that final boss, that relentless final boss, I recommend you click off the video now. Go beat it, get some Shadow Tree fragments, and come back once you've beaten the DLC, and you can see what I think, and we can have a discussion in the comments. So just giving a little context on my experience with Elden Ring and FromSoft games in general. Elden Ring was the first FromSoft game that I played from start to finish. Now, I had played some FromSoft games before, but that was only in the form of Sekiro, in which at the time I had played until, spoilers for Sekiro, the Genichiro boss fight. And then I put it down for a bit because I wasn't really feeling it. I wasn't really a big fan of FromSoft games before this. I tried Demon Souls. I wasn't a big fan of Demon Souls. It just wasn't clicking with me, so I didn't really end up finishing that. Sekiro, though, I did actually go back to after beating Elden Ring, and I absolutely loved it. Once I got through Genichiro, it just all clicked for me, and I love that game. I have it on par with Elden Ring, and personally I think it's harder than Elden Ring. Surprisingly, despite not having played any FromSoft games fully before, did not think the base game of Elden Ring was that hard. Now, in all fairness, for my first playthrough, I was using summons because I just wanted to get the full experience. I didn't want to hold myself back. I just wanted to use everything I thought was cool and just enjoy it. Now, currently, I am doing a second playthrough, which I actually just beat Mogon, my Thanos playthrough, in which I just made a character that looks exactly like Thanos because it's your boy Six Stones, gotta do it. So I'm about to jump into the DLC actually with that character now, and on that playthrough I have not been using any summons. And for my first playthrough of the DLC, I also did not use any Spirit Ashes. The only summons I used were the NPC summons. Now, even with the NPC summons, a lot of the time I would use them for a bit, find they were useless or not doing anything or making the boss more difficult for me, and I would just end up beating the bosses solo anyway. So for the most part, I pretty much went through this entire DLC solo, not using spirit summons. So there's some context on the type of player I am for this. So talking about Shadow of the Erdtree specifically, as an artist, I would like to specifically talk about the art direction first. The art direction in Elden Ring, in FromSoft games in general, is fantastic. In the base game, there is so many cool, unique environments that just have you jaw-dropped the moment you enter. So many cool boss designs, so many cool character designs, so many cool weapon designs, each with so many details that a lot of the times when I play the game, again, like on my second playthrough, I will notice things that I just didn't notice before that are tied to the lore behind the character just through their design alone. And that's the hallmark of great character design, great environment design, is being able to notice these details and see the story told just by looking at the environment or the character. And that quality maintains into the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. I think a great example of this is when you first enter the Lands of Shadow and you are hit with the sight of this towering Shadow Tree, which has taken the place of the Golden Erdtree, with these beautiful veils covering these lands, seeping with gold coming out of the tree. And then you look down and you see the gravesite plains with what is a beautiful yet creepy sight with all these glowing graves around. You see the creepy fire giant in the background with a cage full of bodies. There's a forest behind you. Instantly, you're just hit with a beautiful beautiful sight, and that just instantly invites you to want to explore it. On the topic of exploration, I found exploring the DLC very rewarding, which was always the case with Elden Ring in general, whereas you could see something in the distance and you knew you could go there, and there was a decent chance you would find something cool there. And that was the same case for the DLC, but in the DLC, they take a different approach to the exploration. Whereas the Lands Between was more spanning, it's more on a horizontal plane. Yes, you had your verticals and your undergrounds, but for the most part, you're going across, not down or up. In the DLC, there is a lot of verticality, and I thought it was really cool them adding that verticality. Now, Miyazaki, when this first was being teased and everything, and they were just talking about it from the trailers and stuff, said this DLC is about the size of Limgrave. That is the biggest lie I have ever heard in my life. That man just doesn't have a good sense of scale, because sure, it might look like the size of Limgrave. It don't even look like the size of Limgrave. I don't know what I'm saying. It's like Limgrave, Caelid, and Liurnia combined, and then you have the verticality of it all, which makes it, yes, it's a smaller area than the base game, but it's got a lot of density to it, where you can go up, you can go down, and you'll probably find something really cool. I would very often find myself checking every nook and cranny I could possibly find, just to see if there was any secrets there, if there was a cool weapon there. And very often I was rewarded with a new weapon, or maybe I found a Shadow Tree fragment, or a new consumable, or some lore, an NPC. It just felt very rewarding to just explore. Now, even with how thorough I was exploring just by myself using my own intuition, there was still things that I did not find. And when I looked up guides to just streamline my playtime, now I know there's some FromSoft people that are getting in a hissy fit. It's like, oh my god, he used a guide. Look, I don't care, right? I'm not the biggest fan of being lost for too long. I find being lost fun for a little bit, but then if it starts to creep onto an hour of me being lost, I start to get a little irritated. So yes, I used some guides. I will say the guides were mainly for the quests, just because I find with the way Elden Ring handles quest lines, it's very easy to miss things, or to accidentally progress the game too far, and now you're locked out of a really cool quest line with some really cool rewards and some very exciting lore, and you have to play the entire game all over again. Now, I am the type of person that isn't very fond of replaying games too often. I don't usually replay games often unless I really like that game, or it just has a lot of replayability, or the second playthrough brings a lot of new content to it where it feels almost completely different. So like stuff like Baldur's Gate, it feels very different to do a second playthrough, or just, Elden Ring. I've done a second playthrough. I'm doing it without summons. I'm using different builds, and I'm being a lot more thorough. Like I want to, on the second playthrough, I'm using guides to make sure that I don't miss anything, because I want to experience everything. I'm usually the type of person that when I do my first playthrough, I try to experience everything I possibly can in that playthrough, so that way I've had the full experience and I can move on to the next game. Now, I did try to do that for the DLC, and I did experience a large majority of the quests. Even then, there was a quest line that I completely missed, and on my second playthrough, I planned to do it, which was with that Fire Knight Quinlan guy. I had no idea there was a quest line attached to Fire Knight Quinlan. I thought he was just some bum-ass invader that you just killed and took a reward from, but apparently there is more to it. So anyway, tangent aside, the art direction and the exploration in this game is phenomenal, and is rewarding to pay attention to. And if you do take the time to pay attention to the details in both the art and just the way you play when exploring, you will feel real. You might find a completely new boss, and that boss might have so many details in its design that you find completely new pieces of lore without even having to read a single piece of text on an item or even experience any dialogue. And that is just top tier. Now, going back to that tangent, we might as well get into talking about quest lines and the story and lore behind this DLC. Now, I'm not gonna do a deep dive Varty type beat discussion about this. I'm gonna keep it a bit more brief. I'm not that channel. I don't have all the knowledge like they do. They are the GOATs. Smalltown, Varty, y'all are the goats when it comes to lore. I watch a lot of their videos to help myself understand the story of Elden Ring. But I felt the way they handled the narrative and the lore in this video a lot more enjoyable, in my opinion, than the base game. Now, the base game does have amazing lore, has very interesting. But for me, I don't really like the way that to really experience the lore, you have to read a bunch of text on items, or pretty much find a YouTube video to tell you pretty much everything about them. Like, yes, you get some stuff from just experiencing it, obviously, in the cutscenes and so forth, but a lot of it you just would not get from the base game unless you sit and read for a lot. And I want to play the game, right? I don't really want to slow down. It's like when I'm playing it, I'm too excited about fighting the next boss to sit and read every single item. However, in the DLC, I did take a lot more time to read items, and I found the quest lines, the way they were structured, the idea of us tracking the footprints of Miquella and trying to solve the mystery of why Miquella is in the Shadowland, what they are planning, and seeing these characters that are also on the same journey as you, and you're learning with them as they discover more to this mystery, was, for me, way more engaging than the base game, where it's just you go off and become tarnished, and then you have the quest lines that give you obviously the different endings and so forth, which are great, mind you, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying any of the base game quest lines are bad, but the way Shadow of the Erdtree structured it is definitely a bit more streamlined and feels a bit more like your traditional narrative compared to how they do it in other FromSoft games. Like, this felt a bit more closer to their Sekiro style storytelling, but not losing the Elden Ring flair that they usually do with their traditional questing. And I think if they can find a way to fuse the Sekiro style storytelling with what they've got here in Shadow of the Erdtree, I think we're looking for not only banger lore, but also a banger narrative, which I think could make for a phenomenal game in the future. I'm excited to see what they do next. But yeah, I liked talking to each of the characters. For example, Absnuk, I found a very fascinating character, somebody that served the Lord Moog, investigating into it, what happened to his former master. Freya, who was a warrior of the Redmanes, looking into the context behind Radahn and his defeat and everything. Leda, who is a psychopath, by the way, and her just being a devout knight to Miquella that will do anything to make sure that Miquella gets what he wants. And then, obviously, you got Hornsen and a whole bunch of... Don't get me started about Moore. I love Moore. That guy is adorable. He's so sweet. He just wants to find things and make people happy. How could you not love him? So the DLC, I think, really succeeded in that end. And I hope it's something they take into consideration with their future games. I think also the way it handled its reveals also made the story of this DLC very compelling. For example, the reveal in Mesmer's castle when you're going between Freya and Absnuk that Miquella has taken Moog's body and Radahn's soul, and plans to use Moog's body to revive Radahn into his promised consort. And even when I was exploring, which is another example to complement the exploration, randomly I just get a message saying a seal is broken. And then I remembered from exploring beforehand that there was a cave I couldn't access. So I go back to that cave to access it, I explore it, I fight the Putrescent Knight, which, not my favourite boss fight, but it was a boss fight either way and it was kind of cool. You eventually find Saint Trina, and you get another lore dump with Saint Trina, Thalia, and how Miquella discarded the one thing people believed he should have never discarded. And that Saint Trina was that thing, was how he discarded his love. And that Saint Trina believed that Miquella was about to encage himself to put himself in this eternal prison of godhood and wants you to kill him, which added another set of layers to it. But not only do you get that, but going in there and breaking the seal breaks the charm over the characters that you've been going through the game with. This band of people following Miquella, they all start to have now their own personal thoughts outside of the charming of Miquella. Leda is still devotedly committed, but then she sees the falter in the people around her and decides, I need to start offing them, which is crazy, because none of them said they weren't following Miquella. She just assumes that, oh, okay, they don't, the charm's gone, they're not as good as I am, I'm a killer. Relax, Leda, alright? maybe we should stop assuming things and talk to them first. But anyway, there's other characters where it's like Hornsent, who he's just like, look, I just want to fight Mesmer. I just want revenge. I don't care if Mikola had me under a charm. Doesn't change anything. Absnak is like, Mikola's crazy. He evil. He violated my master. I can't let that slide, and I'ma spin the block. And I'ma ride with you, gang, if you decide to do it with me. Which I respect. Absnak is a ride or die. He don't even care that you killed Moog. He's like, nah, you beat him on a fair one-on-one. How can I hate you for that? I just need you to help me put the hands on Mikola for the violation. And I respect that. Or even Freya. Freya's just like, hey, yo, Radar gets to come back for more war? Gas. I know he would have been down for that, so I'ma be down for it too. Mikola, whatever you want to do, I'm about it. And Absnak, if you want to fight, we can fight, man. I've been waiting to fight you for a long time. Pull up with the blade, gang. And Absnak's like, bet. If it happened, it happened. If we pull up, we pull up. Respect, own it, one-on-one, let's do this. Even though when it comes to the final section, when you fight the group, it is not a respectable one-on-one. I got jumped by Leda and the group, and that fight took me longer than I felt like it should have. And that was one of the few times I did use a Mimic Summon, because I didn't have Dolia that's supposed to help you on that. It was just me and Absnak. Okay, this is a 5-on-2. That ain't fair. So I'm gonna make it a 5-on-3, and y'all can't hate me for it, because y'all decided to jump me, so I'm using the anti-jump tool. Don't, look, it was fair in my eyes. And if you don't see how it's fair, then I don't know what to tell you. But anyway, another tangent. The story, handled really well. The lore, very interesting. And there is one specific character in this game with such amazing lore, and the cutscenes around them just made me fall in love with them as a character, and now is my new favorite character in the DLC. And that is Mesmer the Impaler.
Yet my purpose standeth unchanged. Those stripped of the grace of gold shall all meet death. In the embrace of Mesmer's flame.
Since I spoiled it already, Mesmer is my favorite boss in this DLC, and is possibly my favorite boss in all of Elden Ring. I think he is great on a art direction standpoint. His character design is phenomenal. His voice acting is phenomenal. The cutscene leading into the boss is phenomenal. Leading into the second phase is phenomenal. The music is great. The moveset behind him is great. Every move has so much personality to it. Oozes so much character in both first and second phase. None of the fight for me felt like it was unreasonable to fight against. Like, everything felt like, even though it was crazy, it was relentless, and it was tricky, it was difficult, one of the harder bosses for a lot of people, I found it fun. It was a very fun fight. And that's why he's probably my new favorite boss, which used to be Malekith. I love Malekith. He's badass, he's cool in every type of way, and I think his boss fight is badass. But the bosses in this DLC, for the most part, are really good, and they are definitely a difficulty spike compared to most of the base game. But I do have some issues with some of the bosses in this game, and I do think From Software could have done a better job. And I know some of you are probably thinking, how dare I say that? But let me explain. Now, I don't want to dive too deep into the bosses, because I do plan to do a boss ranking video in the future of all the Remembrance bosses. But talking about my issue, a lot of the bosses I feel in the DLC have a lack of personality compared to the base game. And I feel like a lot of bosses in this DLC should have had voice lines, and probably should have had cutscenes too. I think the main culprits of this are Rilana, Commander Gaius, and Ramin. Rilana, I find absolutely inexcusable that she doesn't have a cutscene, yet alone any voice lines. And I know people have gone and data mined the game and found that they do have a voice actor for Rilana, and they do have voice lines for her character that they just didn't use. So it baffles me, because Rilana, if you don't know, is the twin sister of Renala, a main boss in the base game, a remembrance boss who had a whole cutscene and dialogue and a lot of lore attached to, and is a big character in the Elden Ring world. And now we're meeting her twin sister in the Lands of Shadow, who for some reason is serving under Mesmer. And she doesn't say a damn thing. You get no dialogue, you get no cutscene, she just fights you, and it kind of gives this essence of her just feeling like a glorified carrion knight. And I really don't like that. Because I think her moveset is cool, I think her boss fight is good, but it lacked personality, that fight for me, in a way I felt it just shouldn't have. Commander Gaius is supposed to be one of Mesmer's closest friends, apparently was also friends with Radahn, but also just has no dialogue, and to me, Commander Gaius just felt like a glorified tree sentinel with gravity magic. It just lacked that sense of personality for me that really made me connect to a lot of the bosses in the base game. Even Romana, who I just found out is apparently the lady that we saw in the trailer while everything's being burned with that spear in her hand, which is an incredible reveal and sounds like there'd be a lot of lore attached to it, and there's a lot of lore about how her church was bound down and she eventually found the Scarlet Rot and gave herself to the god and stuff. And I feel like you didn't have to have a full-on cutscene for Romina. She's a very easy boss, but you could have at least had some dialogue of her just talking in a creepy way, talking about the Scarlet Rot, the god that she devoted her life to, what Mesmer did, her viewing you as another person to come onto a sacred ground and defile it or something. Just anything to add some flavor and personality to that boss. Because the base game, every major boss had so much personality. I'm pretty sure almost all of them had cutscenes, and that was what made those bosses stick. Melania stuck with her iconic line about her being the blade of Mikola, become the goddess of rock. Even characters that in the lore are basically bums, like Godric or Margot, had so much personality to them that you could attach to them and you remember them. Whereas in the DLC, I feel like a lot of the bosses are somewhat forgettable. And that is one major criticism I have of the DLC and something that I really don't like. Now, when it comes to, from a gameplay standpoint, how much do I like the bosses? I like a lot of the bosses. For example, I already said I like Mesmer a lot. I think his moveset and combat is really good. I think Renala is a good boss fight. I personally like her moveset a lot and I found it fun to play against. Even Promised Consort Radahn, who I know is a love or hate boss in the community. When I was playing it, I was frustrated, but after I beat it, I found that I actually really enjoyed the fight, and I think his moveset is really cool. It's got a lot of flair, it's exciting. I love the second phase with Mikola, even though it's relentless, and I would wish it would let me breathe a couple seconds. And fighting him, for me, I fought him at night. I've seen people fight him in the broad of daylight in the second phase so they can actually see stuff. For me, I can't. It's pitch black and I'm getting flashbanged every second. So it made it a lot harder for me. But I still enjoyed it. But there is some bosses that I feel just weren't that fun for me. For example, Commander Gaius. I did not like Commander Gaius. Now, I seem to be the only person that decided to fight Commander Gaius on horse and enjoyed fighting him on horse and found it easier on horseback. Apparently everybody else says it's easier to fight him on your foot. I fought him on horseback. And horseback combat in Elden Ring isn't the most exciting thing, which makes it not the most exciting boss fight. So Commander Gaius is one of my least favorites. The Putrescent Knight is one I'm also just not as fond of. I think the Putrescent Knight is, for me, kind of the most boring design-wise. I don't think it's a bad design, but it just doesn't excite me like the other bosses in the DLC. I also think his moveset is very standard, and he has a lot of attacks that you just can't punish, so it's just a delay move to make the fight longer, and it's just obnoxious. So I didn't enjoy him as much. Everyone else I thought was pretty fun or a decent fight, or the spectacle. If it wasn't, I enjoyed the fight due to the technicality of the movements and the moveset of the boss. It was more something I enjoyed of the spectacle of the boss. The Dancing Lion, I think the spectacle of that boss is really good. Bale, spectacle, really good. Even meta, I think the spectacle is pretty good. So for the most part, the bosses are alright in this DLC. I like a good chunk of them, but I have my complaints, and I think they could have done a bit better in the boss department. Finally, I just want to talk about the new weapons, incantations, ashes of war, and so forth. that they added to the DLC to enhance the gameplay front, which I found very enjoyable. I found myself trying out a lot of different weapons for a lot of different bosses. One I gravitated to the most was the Renala Twin Blades. I loved those blades. I thought they were so much fun. The Light Greatsword moveset is just a very enjoyable moveset. And I am a Dex player at heart. I love fast movesets. Fast, fluid movesets is my playstyle in just about every game. I'm not the slow, strength, heavy sword type. Even though when it came to Radahn, I did use the Bloody Fiend's finger or arm because that boss was beating my ass for too long and I was like, I need to change my build. So I tried that out and I managed to beat him in a few tries after that, so it worked. That is an example of what I mean by how I enjoyed how the boss forced me, well, it didn't force me, but it guided me into trying new things to get around certain bosses, or just off the fact that I thought the weapon looked so cool that I wanted to try it out. For example, the Golden Hippo, I used a shield for the first time, and I found that really fun to fight with a shield. The Shadow Tree Avatar, I fought with Mesmer's Spear, which I thought was such a fun weapon to use. I also used that against Leather and her group because of the general AoE it had, so I could get multiple opponents at once. The extra fire damage against the Shadow Tree, which made it useful for that. And then I tried other weapons such as the backhand blades I'm trying out now on my second playthrough. And there's even more weapons I want to try out and Ashes of War I want to try out on my second playthrough. For example, I've been looking into a Twin Blade build with the Crucible Wings Ash of War, which just looks like such a fun moveset to use. And I'm excited to test that out. And with my second playthrough, me doing the DLC before I actually finish the game, I can take a lot of those weapons into that final stretch of the game and have a lot of fun with them against the base bosses of this game. So I think in that department, they aced it. A lot of cool weapons. I wish there was a bit more weapons for the new weapon types. A lot of the new weapon types only have 1 or 2 actual weapons in it, and there's a lot more weapons for stuff we already have, I feel like. But there's so much they added in general to this game that I'm not even mad at it. They basically dropped a DLC which is the size of a good chunk of games, which is insane and very impressive. I clocked in about 50 hours into this DLC alone. I don't think I clocked that many hours into Miles Morales, which is a standalone game that's slightly smaller. Now, don't get me wrong, they are 2 very different games in completely different genres and completely different contexts, right? So it's not really fair to compare them. But it's just going to say that Shadow of the Erdtree is a substantial package. So going into my final thoughts on the DLC, I think Shadow of the Erdtree is an amazing package and a fantastic DLC. Truly one of the best DLCs I have ever played. I do think there is some things they could improve on here and there. For example, the boss fights. I think they could have had a little bit more personality injected into some of them. And I felt like the quest lines still feel a bit too vague in the way they handle things, to where it does feel like you need a guide to even know what to do for a lot of these quest lines. And I still think that's something they need to improve on in the future. And something I didn't mention with the exploration, but it is a little tricky to explore sometimes. It's a little hard to find your way in the DLC just because of the verticality and the lack of maps for underground sections, unlike the base game where you have a map for the underground section, which made it easier. There's not really that for the DLC, so you kind of have to look at the map and somehow figure out a secret path to get to a place that's underground, which is very often very hard to find. And sometimes I would have to look up a guide just to find out where specifically I'm supposed to go. But apart from those few complaints, I think Shadow of the Erdtree is great. I would give it a final score of 5 out of 6 Infinity Stones. That's my thoughts on the DLC. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more videos. And if you enjoyed the art in this video, be sure to follow me on Instagram and Twitter. And subscribe and like if you enjoyed the video. And I will see you in the next one.